Its Game Boy world in anime was a mistake. It's nothing but trash. Remember SD Gundam Sengokuden? Well, it's back in Ultraman form. Yes, TOSE and Bandai are back with another licensed game, and despite being based on a long-running tokusatsu franchise, Ultraman,
Finally, he has also changed.
rather than the multi-tentacled mecha anime Gundam, this game is remarkably similar in concept to our last TOSE Bandai pairing. Like SD Sengokuden, Ultraman Club Teki Kaiju no Hekken Seiyo is an abstract, battle-centric strategy board game. Remember what I said in the Heavyweight Championship boxing episode about TOSE being only as good as their publisher? Well, here's a fine example of that principle in action. Ultraman Club turns up on the poor end of the mediocre scale, in keeping with Bandai's standard practices with games based on its anime properties. It's not completely wretched by any means, but Lord knows it ain't good. The shape this game took seems a little strange within the long view. Going by the title, it's part of the Ultraman Club spin-off games, which appeared on Famicom and Famicom Disk System between 1988 and 1993. In fact, Ultraman Club 2, Kaete Kita Ultraman Club, debuted for Famicom about a month before this Game Boy release. But title and property aside, the two have practically nothing to do with one another. The Famicom Ultraman Clubs took the form of Dragon Quest-ish role-playing games. Nothing special, but reasonably competent. However, a decent Dragon Quest clone would be a miraculous godsend compared to the reality of this game, which is a sort of awkward, opaque strategy board game. Again, while it plays out differently in action, the overall look and style of Ultraman Club bears a strong similarity to SD Sengokuden. While there's no conclusive proof online that TOSE helped develop the first ever portable Gundam game, its resemblance to this game, which TOSE definitely had a hand in if Game Developers Research Institute's finding are to be believed, seems to bear that theory out. The presumed involvement of TOSE in both Ultraman and Gundam's Game Boy debuts would go a long way toward explaining why the two are, structurally speaking, almost entirely identical. Like SD Sengokuden, Ultraman Club takes the form of a sort of proto-Advance Wars game, where encounters between the player's units and enemies play out as battles. Unlike SD Sengokuden, however, these showdowns are mercifully considerably less terrible. Rather than resembling an imbecile's idea of a fighting game in which you run around jamming your thumb on the attack button as quickly as possible, they're closer in nature to a role-playing game. In fact, the one-on-one battle format of Ultraman Club exists as a sort of forebear to the franchise that would eventually come to dominate Game Boy, Pokemon. In each battle, you face off against one opponent in a turn-based fight, choosing your actions from a palette of 4 limited abilities. Don't get excited though, this game is nowhere up to the level of Pokemon. It's far more limited, not to mention random. Rather than build up your characters through a long series of battles and progressively customize their powers, instead, you're given 4 skills per round, at random. You're forced to choose from these specific actions for that round, even if some of the options you're given have no use. You choose the order in which you execute your commands, and the round plays out turn by turn. The available commands, which appear, again, at random, are drawn from a pool of 4 different options: attack, defend, use an item, or use a mystery ability. Generally, you'll be given 2 attack slots, 1 defense slot, and a randomly selected final slot that either lets you use an item or the mystery ability, which usually works out to be either a standard attack or a free use of your character's special attack, assuming they've acquired it yet. Because you have to predetermine your 4 actions at the beginning of a round, Ultraman Club might remind you a bit of something like Mega Man Battle Chip Challenge or Armored Core. Of course, those games came quite a bit later, so if Ultraman Club owes its inspiration to anything, it's probably Silas Warner's Robot War. Something tells me TOSE wasn't making quite that deep a cut here, though. Ultraman Club involves a tremendous amount of randomness and dumb luck. Besides the per-round lottery of abilities, you also have to hope your battle selections match up with your enemies. Bad guys are given a similar assortment of action options at the beginning of a round to your own. On top of that, you also have to contend with the seeming whims of the computer as it determines which character moves first, and the completely unpredictable random number generator that affects each action you take. This seems to work out in your favor, or not, with about 50-50 odds, which is fair, but not really that fun. For example, during a turn in which you choose to defend, you can optionally either dodge an attack or run away from the battle. Dodging seems to work with 100% certainty, assuming you get to perform your action before the enemy moves, which appears to be determined, again, entirely at random. When you choose an attack round, you can always either punch, kick, or perform a karate chop. So far as I can tell though, there's no real difference between any of these actions. None have speed priority over the others, and the damage they inflict is determined, yes, you guessed it, entirely at random. A punch might dink a bad guy for 1/10 of its health one round, then deliver a one-hit kill against the same enemy type next time. There's really no way to predict how your actions will turn out, which undermines the value of your actions and turns Ultraman Club into basically a load of luck-based nonsense. Even more frustrating is when you're forced to use items as an action, since in order to make use of them, you have to buy them at a shop first, and the shop appears randomly on the field map. Items tend to be very expensive, and buying one burns a turn on the field map, so more often than not, a compulsory item turn is a free hit for your opponent, as you stand there doing nothing. The one ability you can actually count on in a pinch is your fighter's special attack. Special abilities vary from character to character, they hit with more consistent power than standard actions, and they rarely miss. The downside to special moves is that you can only use them once per battle, unless you get a free use with one of the random question mark actions. If your opponent chooses to dodge on the turn you execute a special attack, though, you've whiffed your best shot at victory. Special attacks come with other limitations too. For starters, you don't earn them until you defeated an enemy and leveled up. Each character in the game, both heroes and enemies, begin with 100 hit points and the ability to reach a much higher maximum. Every time you win a battle, the victor's HP rises closer to the max. This is true for both good and bad guys, and it tends to create huge brick walls to overcome. The totally random nature of combat means, at the game's outset, the monster forces are just as likely to win as the player's Ultraman forces. If you lose a lot of early battles, the monsters who defeated you grow stronger, making it much more difficult to win against them in the future. The same holds true for your own leveled up heroes, but due to the fact that the enemy movements are hidden on the map screen, it can be difficult to maneuver juiced up heroes to intercept monsters. Plus, the randomness of the game means there's no guarantee that a powered-up character will necessarily win. I've seen starter-level characters defeat a foe several times more powerful by virtue of the game's completely chaotic combat handling, which is amusing when it allows you to overcome impossible odds, and infuriating when your best warrior goes down to a scrub. All in all, Ultraman Club is pretty much the definition of mediocre. I'm not at all familiar with the Ultraman franchise, so the fan service is lost on me. You control an army of different Ultramen, and Ultrawomen I guess, all of whom have different names and very slightly different sprites and special powers. But really, it's all pretty much the same, if not in fact, then at least in practice, due to the utter lack of control players have over the outcome of combat. Lacking as Ultraman Club may be, though, it does have one thing going for it. It's not Zoids Densetsu. I'm even less familiar with the Zoids franchise than I am with Ultraman, but from what I've been able to glean, Zoids was a toy line and anime franchise that existed contemporarily with Transformers and Voltron and attempted to tap into the same general zeitgeist. Rather than transforming or combining, though, Zoids simply existed as robot dinosaurs or whatever. In the case of Zoids Densetsu, the franchise carries forward that vague spiritual connection to Transformers by giving us a callow shooter every bit as terrible as the infamous Transformers Convoy no Nazo for Famicom. In some ways, Zoids Densetsu might actually be worse. If you've ever played a shoot-'em-up, you have played a game similar to Zoids Densetsu, except inevitably better. This is some barrel-bottom trash here, a lousy side-scroller featuring terrible gameplay and equally abysmal aesthetics. If you think back to the Solar Striker episode, you'll recall I made a case for that game's general simplicity as a function of the Game Boy's hardware. While Konami's Nemesis demonstrated that intricate-looking shooters can work on Game Boy, generally, action games need uncluttered visuals in order to work on the system's substandard screen. but a side-by-side comparison of Solar Striker and Zoids Densetsu offers a stark and frankly depressing reminder that there are different kinds of simplicity. In the case of the former game, the stark backgrounds and streamlined power-up system arrived hand in hand with thoughtful enemy patterns and challenging but nicely balanced difficulty. Zoids Densetsu, on the other hand, weds its simplicity to dull enemies, unreasonably punishing stage layouts, and an overwhelming sense of sloppiness. It is by all standards a terrible game. Let's begin with the action. Players take control of one of 3 different Zoids machines, beginning with a weak robot that can barely soak up 2 hits, and moving progressively to more powerful mechs as each is defeated. These robots are differentiated through their sprites and through their upgrade paths. Each Zoid has a different special weapon that can be collected throughout the stages, and each one's standard weapon can be upgraded twice to fire in a slightly different pattern. But each one moves at about the same speed and has the same maximum hit point total, boosted through capsules collected along the way. Worse, each one has the same hitbox, which is huge. This is not one of those shooters where you have an enormous ship that's only vulnerable in a small hot zone. It's the bad kind of shooter, where you have an enormous ship that takes damage if it makes even glancing contact with anything, including, for some reason, rocks and patches of grass. Every time you suffer damage, you lose 1 level of upgrade to your standard weapon, kind of like in Blaster Master. This is a recipe for misery, and Zoids Densetsu serves up a feast. There are only 4 worlds here with 2 stages apiece. The game could theoretically be cleared within about 20 minutes. The developers compensate for the game's brevity, however, by making it ridiculously difficult in a cheap and unfair way. At about the midpoint of the game, right before the second boss, you encounter a series of lava-spewing volcanoes on a rapid timer surrounded by floating rocks. It's a grueling gauntlet that provides almost no space for your oversized robots to squeeze through. While the game grants you infinite continues, every time you die, you're sent back to the beginning of the current stage. The strategy at play in Zoids Densetsu is not to outmatch players, but rather to wear them down by sheer tedium. But wait, there's still hope! At the title screen, Zoids Densetsu offers you the ability to play as 2 different factions, the Republic and the Empire. Does playing as the other side perhaps alleviate the frustration? Does it offer a more reasonable and balanced approach to level layouts? More manageably designed robots to control? No, it does not. No, literally the only difference between the Republic's game and the Empire's comes down to the character and enemy sprites. Your robots possess the exact same traits and skills regardless of which side they're on. Moreover, the level designs and enemy behavior are exactly the same either way as well. Even the bosses play out the same, simply with different sprites. I'm always reluctant to criticize a video game by calling it lazy, but Zoids Densetsu really puts that philosophy to the test. It's a sloppy, cheaply made cash-in on a kid's license, a craven and cynical attempt to wrest money from children without offering them even a hint of entertainment in return. Zoids Densetsu comes to us courtesy of our friends at Nova Games, who were also responsible for Ultraman Club. Where that was merely a deeply mediocre game, however, Zoids Densetsu is legitimate trash. Again, we can probably pin this on the publisher, which in both cases were the game divisions of Japanese toy companies. Ultraman Club was brought to us by Banpresto, which became a division of Ultraman Club publisher Bandai in 1989. Neither Banpresto nor Bandai seem to make much of a commitment toward greatness, but on the other hand, you can expect a certain minimal level of competence with most games they publish. Tomy, on the other hand, made their game publishing debut with Zoids Densetsu, and it established the standard the company would live down to for decades to come. With the close proximity of these 2 toy-based releases, it's safe to say the floodgates of licensed mediocrity have well and truly been opened for Game Boy. We're approaching rapidly a time in which we'll pine for something so benign as a boring puzzle game. Enjoy the ride. For endless torrents of utter garbage bearing the vague likeness of beloved children's properties, keep watching Game Boy World. Next time, the benign bliss of a boring puzzle game.